In this video, we will discuss the origins and history of Islam. It's important to start out by defining a few terms that we use when we talk about Islam as a religious tradition. First, of course, is Islam. This is the word that we use to describe the religious tradition as a whole. The word literally means submission to God. Islamic is an adjective, just like we see Jewish to describe something, some noun. Islamic functions in the same way. You might have an Islamic tradition or an Islamic ritual or Islamic scripture. Islamic is used as an adjective. Muslim is the name that we use as a noun for someone who adheres to the tradition of Islam. The origins of Islam date back to the 7th century CE. But before this, there's some context that's important to understand when we talk about Islam, dating back to the 6th, 5th, and so on centuries in pre-Islamic Arabia. In pre-Islamic Arabia, the tribe is everything, and everything is organized within and around the tribe. This tribal society had tribes as the main highest authority, with subclans under the tribes, and then families within the subclans. In pre-Islamic Arabia, there were a variety of religious traditions that were followed. The primary religion was paganism, and in the Kaaba, the central temple of ancient Islam and modern-day Islam as well, pagan idols were found, though they were considered to be intermediaries to one specific chief deity. Christianity and Judaism were also present in pre-Islamic Arabia. Remember that Christianity comes about as a religious tradition sometime in the 1st and 2nd century CE, so this exists for about 400 years before the advent of Islam. When Muslims look back at pre-Islamic Arabia and note the differences in religious beliefs and practices, some that would even be outlawed by the Quran, they might note that some of their ancestors had actions that were inexcusable in the eyes of the Islamic tradition. Because of this, pre-Islamic Arabia, in the time that the people before the Quran existed, were essentially excused for their actions because they did not know about the Quran or these revelations from God. This time was called an age of ignorance, or in Arabic, Jahiliyyah. The Prophet Muhammad, who becomes the founder of Islam, was born in 570 CE in the city of Mecca. He was part of this tribal society and practiced paganism. He was part of the tribe Quraysh and part of the Banu Hashim clan. His uncle, Abu Talib, was the leader of the Banu Hashim clan. Now, since the tribe was pagan, we see that the advent of Islam creates a rift between the pagan tribe and clan and the new Islamic tradition that is monotheistic. The Prophet Muhammad worked as a merchant, and he was hired by a prominent merchant and widow named Khadijah. And Khadijah, who was 40 at the time, proposed to Muhammad, who was 25 at the time, and the two became married. As we'll see here in a bit, Khadijah is believed to be the first convert to Islam. Muhammad was called Al-Amin, which literally means trusted one. This was a nickname given to the Prophet Muhammad even before he receives the message of the Quran. And this is important because it shows within the tradition that he is credible and worthy to receive the message of the Quran. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad is called the seal of the prophets. He's believed to be the final prophet in a line of prophets, which included Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Muhammad is not understood to be a Messiah figure, but rather a messenger from God. We'll talk a bit more about the Quran and its structure in a later video, but the Quran is essential to understanding the tradition and message of Islam. According to the tradition, the Prophet Muhammad retreated to caves for reflection even before the revelation of the Quran, and frequently went there for solitude, reflection, and so on. In 610 CE, in the cave of Hira, he received a visit from the angel Gabriel, who told him to recite. In the Islamic tradition, this is considered to be a miraculous beginning to the Quran, because Muhammad was probably illiterate, based on the time and context of his culture. Gabriel supposedly has Muhammad recognize that Allah, which literally means God in Arabic, is the creator and should be worshipped alone, without other pagan gods. Muhammad receives the message of the Quran around the age of 40, according to the tradition. After this time, he begins to spread his message to other people and convert other people to this new tradition. It's important to note, just like we see with Jesus understanding Christianity as more of a reinterpretation of a religion that already exists, rather than a new tradition on its own, that Muhammad sees this new religion in a very similar way. The early Muslims and most Muslims today understand the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament as important scriptures within their tradition, and that the Quran is simply a continuation of this. So the Prophet Muhammad at this time appears to have believed that his new tradition, as we might call it, was rather just a reinterpretation in the right way of what existed before. There were some conflicts, of course, with the polytheistic pagan society, particularly, between them and the monotheistic Islamic society. But we do see some early converts to Islam. The first of these, of course, is probably Khadijah, who is Muhammad's wife. He appears to have gone back to Khadijah and told her what happened in the cave, and she converted to this new tradition. Ali, who is Muhammad's cousin, was one of the first converts to Islam, as well as Abu Bakr, who is Muhammad's advisor and later his father-in-law. There's contention in the tradition over who was the first male convert to Islam, and this is actually one of the things that leads to the split between Sunni and Shia Islam, which we'll talk about later. After these early converts, the Prophet Muhammad and these other early Muslims began to expand Islam to other places. In 622 CE, there was significant persecution of Muslims in Mecca, where Muhammad was born, lived, and received the message of the Quran. Because of this persecution by the pagans, the Muslims tried to flee Mecca in what we call hijra, or immigration, to Medina in 622. The city of Medina is taken and becomes the second holiest city to Islam, second only to the city of Mecca. During this time in Medina, Islam as a religious and political entity truly takes form. In Medina, Islam grows and expands significantly, and the Islamic army strengthens. These early Muslims and the Prophet Muhammad return to Mecca and take it in 630 CE and cleanse the Kaaba of the pagan idols. In 632 CE, the Prophet Muhammad dies, but leaves no successor named. Abu Bakr, who is his advisor and at this point father-in-law, succeeds Muhammad as the first caliph. Abu Bakr leads Razzia, which are raiding expeditions, to expand the territory of Islam. Remember that Islam, while it is a religious tradition, is also very much a political entity at this point. As we noted earlier, there's a clear split between the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims, and this begins with the debate over who the first male convert was to Islam, Ali or Abu Bakr. Today, approximately 85 to 90% of Muslims are Sunni Muslims. The Sunni Muslims believe that Abu Bakr was the first male convert to Islam. Sunni Muslims focus on what we call the Sunnah, or the traditions and custom of what Muhammad and the four rightly guided caliphs did. This is where we get the word Sunni from. Beginning with Abu Bakr, the Caliphate, which was a group of religious and political leaders in Islam, was founded. Sunni Muslims believe that there were four rightly guided caliphs. There were other caliphs who came after this, and the Caliphate existed until 1924. But these four rightly guided caliphs were the ones who truly followed what the Prophet Muhammad intended for Islam. The first of these, of course, was Abu Bakr, who was caliph from 632 to 634 CE. Second was Umar, who was caliph from 634 to 644 CE. Then Uthman, who was caliph from 644 to 656 CE. During Uthman's caliphate was when the Quran was codified or canonized. And the final was Ali, who was caliph from 656 to 661 CE. The Sunni Muslims, as well as some Shia Muslims, also focus on Islamic law, which is called Sharia. Islamic law is not a written down law, but is written down over time, not set in stone. It's compiled by legal scholars and is not necessarily a concrete thing, but changes over time to adapt to society. In Shia Islam, there is the idea of an imam, who is believed to be an inspired and infallible interpreter of the Quran. We see imams in Sunni Islam, but they function differently rather than as infallible and inspired figures, at least for the most part. In Shia Islam, most Muslims believe that Ali, who is the cousin of Muhammad, and who is believed to be the first male convert to Shia Muslims, was the first imam. Shia Muslims also have mujtahid, who are doctors of the law. They're given the name Ayatollah, which people who are Ayatollah are responsible for interpreting the Sharia law for authoritative religious decisions. As you see Islam develop, you can see that it is very much a political entity as it is a religious entity. Islam continues this after the 7th century into what we call the Ottoman Empire, which is an empire that existed between 1299 to 1922 CE and only ended in World War I. The Ottoman Empire was very much an Islamic state run by Muslims who had religious authority as well as political authority. The Ottoman Empire was founded by Osman I, sometimes called Othman, which is where the name Ottoman comes from. Some people will refer to people existing within the Ottoman Empire as Turks, which is where we get the name Turkey in the Middle East from. While some of the people who were part of the Ottoman Empire were Turks, particularly the founding people, the Ottoman Empire grew so much that all of the people within the empire were not Turks. So this is a bit of a misnomer when we discuss the Ottoman Empire. In the Ottoman Empire, there were sultans, who were primarily responsible for the political leadership. In addition, the caliphate reigned alongside the sultans as both political leaders and religious leaders. You can see in this map the expansion of the Ottoman Empire, beginning in 1299 or 1300 in this small area. You can note Constantinople, which becomes Istanbul, right here. Over the next 100 years, 200 years or so, it expands significantly to encompass all of this dark brown area. And it continues expanding to eventually cover all of the different colors that we see here up until 1683. The Ottoman Empire covered a significant amount of Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and part of Asia as well. Now that we have reached the end of this video, you should be able to explain the origins of Islam and importance of Muhammad to the tradition, identify and describe key events and figures that led to the formation of Islam as a separate religious and political entity, and describe and explain the basic divisions of the Islamic tradition and their belief systems.